What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Fantasy Flex Podcast. I am your host, Chris Raybon, and this is our NFC North offseason fantasy preview. We'll be talking everything to do with the NFC North. I got my dude, Sean Kerner, here with me. Sean, what's going on?
What's up? Congrats on the NBA season being over. So now you can, focus fully on NFL now with me.
I know. I'm excited. I've been kind of all up in my ranking spreadsheet all week, trying to get all these undrafted free agents that I'm going to end up deleting again to my spreadsheet. But I like to have the rosters like 100% accurate.
Yeah.
Just to kind of go through camp. But I've been watching a lot of hockey lately too. So you might lose me for another extra week.
Oh my God! After I went to that Kings Oilers game. And I bet on like the in-game under, it was like 10.5, something crazy. And they scored a goal with like 5 seconds left. I refuse to bet on hockey ever again.
Yeah. I feel like my winning percentage on live, like events that I go to live is so much lower because most of those bets are made drunkenly.
You're forcing the issue. Like we did with the Sparks game. That was like the only bet I didn't put in the app. And the only bet that lost that night. That was brutal.
Good thing we didn't. Yeah, that under. Yeah. All right. So we're gonna jump right into this NFC North. We'll talk player by player. But before we do that, just a note to you guys out there. First of all, thank you for listening. Second of all, we have the contest winner to announce, and just a reminder to rate and review the podcast, because each week, we'll be calling out our favorite 5-star review right here on the show. And every reviewer we call out gets a free Action Network Pro subscription for 1 whole year. So be sure to leave those awesome Apple Podcast reviews and keep listening to hear us shout you out. This week's winner is Clint Pardue. Thank you, Clint, for the kind words in the review. And you can hit up podcast@actionnetwork.com to claim your free year of an Action Network Pro subscription. That's podcast@actionnetwork.com for Clint Pardue. And congrats. Thank you. All right. Let's get into the Green Bay Packers to start off. Sean, I feel like this might be the year we see a non-MVP year from Aaron Rodgers. I don't know. Like, I don't want to say it and then look stupid, but I just feel like it's going to be so difficult for him to replicate what he's done over the past couple of years with LaFleur without Davante Adams.
Yeah, I like how you leave a little bit of wiggle room there. Non-MVP for sure. Will he still be really good? Yes. But non-MVP, I can definitely get behind that. And when it comes to fantasy, his ADP is QB10 right now. And that does seem like people are just kind of paying for his name, right? I mean, we all know he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He'll make do with what he has this year, but he's going to be without his top dog and Davante Adams. So I don't know how you would take him in the top 10 right now. Like, he still has a super high floor. Like, he's not going to finish outside the top 20 if he stays healthy all year, but he just doesn't have the ceiling to take in the top 10. He doesn't have the same rushing upside that he did earlier in his career. And, a bunch of guys have rushing upside now. So I just don't get why you would take him inside the top 10 right now. If you're in a 1 QB league, you can probably get similar value just by streaming the waiver wire if you do it correctly. So I'm out on him. He'll still be really good, but like you said, it probably won't be like MVP good.
Yeah, I'm thinking, we could see a return to the years that kind of got some people, me included, to prematurely kind of write him off. He was kind of finishing in that QB 9 to QB 14 range before Matt LaFleur got there. But now, yes, LaFleur's still there, but you got Hackett, his offensive coordinator in Denver, and then you got Davante Adams, his go-to wide receiver in Vegas. So those are two very important components of a quarterback's success that are no longer here in Green Bay. The defense is getting better. A.J. Dillon's getting better. So I actually think Green Bay will still be a good team, but they might be one of those teams that's like a lot of running, a lot of defense, and they don't really need Aaron Rodgers to put up MVP caliber numbers anyway.
Yeah, exactly. They're still going to be a really good team. And right, they probably won't have to throw as much this year.
Yeah. And you look at, I got some numbers for it, just to kind of drive the point home. Last 2 years, 9.5 yards per attempt targeting Devontae Adams, 7.8 targeting everyone else. Now, you'd say that's a little higher because you're taking a lot of wide receiver targets away. So, but even if you like, that's a 1.7 difference. Even if you put like a league average wide receiver, you're still talking about over 1 yard per attempt different. And then the touchdown rate, 9.5% per target to Adams, 7.9% to everyone else. So for people out there counting at home, that's about a 10 touchdown difference for 600 attempts if you go from 9.5 to 7.9. And that's before, factoring in just regression of him putting up these MVP like numbers anyway. So I think you could see a lot more of a efficient but pedestrian year from Rodgers this year. All right. The big question, I guess, is how are you projecting the receiving core? Like, who do you have as, like, how do you rank, I guess, the receivers in terms of the target projections right now?
So I am ranking Allen Lazard as Aaron Rodgers' top target this year, which is why I love him at his ADP of wide receiver 46. It's creeping up. Like, I was able to get him outside the top 50 for the past month or so, but it's creeping up. I mean, it should be closer to the top 40. So he's sort of like the Mike Williams last year, where I'm just hammering him away at him, like, in all my drafts. But eventually his ADP is going to catch up. But if you think about it, I mean, he already has chemistry with Aaron Rodgers, a rookie like Christian Watson, a free agent like Sammy Watkins. They're gonna have to build that chemistry with him. So Lazard has that going for him. He has 10 plus touchdown upside this year. Someone's gonna have to catch touchdowns with Devontae Adams gone. And we have to remember, Allen Lazard's only 26 years old, so he's smack dab in the middle of his prime. So he's not the most talented wideout, like, I'll admit that, but he's just in a good position this year to benefit from Adams leaving. So I'm projecting him. He's my wide receiver 40. So right now he's the top wideout in terms of just draft value.
Yeah, I kind of go back and forth on Lazard. Like, I certainly see your point. I think he's the most likely guy as of now to be the number one guy. But, like, I also, like, what do you like? So his targets per route run last year was 14%. It was 17% the 2 years prior. Yeah. Like, how do you foresee him kind of dealing with a little more attention? Because that's what I worry about, because he's not a big separator. I think, he's kind of like the dirty work guy who I think he really benefited from Rodgers targeting Adams like once out of every 3 times, because it was like everyone else was getting single coverage. So, like, Lazard was getting high quality targets. But now I could see, like, defenses, especially if he has like a big game or two early on, defense is kind of adjusting quickly to him and making somebody else beat you. So, I mean, how do you put any stock into that targets per route run, or are you kind of bumping them up into like that 20+% wide receiver 1 range?
No, that's a fair point. And I mean, to be honest, his targets per route run was low last year because he was running routes alongside Devontae Adams. But like you said, the defenses, he might get off to a hot start, and defenses might counter that by doubling him or just putting pressure on him. So similar to Mike Williams last year, if he gets off to a hot start, maybe I'll consider trading him this time. Because that is possible. Like, I will admit that he is sort of a scheme guy. He's not going to really beat people himself.
Yeah.
But then again, Aaron Rodgers is going to force the issue. So, you can go either way. But yeah, the more attention he's going to get, he's not going to be able to overcome that through talent alone. So he does rely on the scheme. So that would worry me of like a second half slump if he does get off to a hot start. But I think he will get off to a hot start.
And I got one more Lazard question, because I want people to kind of, if they're listening to this a little further down, to still derive value from it. Right now, he's the most expensive Packer wide receiver. Yep. His ADP is wide receiver 46 in half PPR in the Fantasy Pros consensus. What is kind of your cap? Like, how high would you go in drafting Lazard before you're passing on?
Right now, I would say, wide receiver 42. That's about, even with my rank. So it was fun drafting him when he was wide receiver 55. And I love getting him in that range of the draft because there are a lot of question marks And for somebody that he's not a sexy pick, like I said, he doesn't have, blazing speed or anything like that. So he does have high upside for his lack of talent, I should say. But once you get into the top 40, you're going to be having to not take guys with massive talent, massive upside as well. So I think 42 would probably be my cap. And like I said, the ADP is really catching up. So at 46, a lot of that value is kind of gone, but I still think he has that, touchdown upside that I do like to get in that range. What about you? Like, are you interested in him once he gets inside the top 50, or are you kind of backing off?
I think wide receiver 46 is kind of where I have him. So my thing with the projecting the season long outlooks for these guys, and obviously we'll talk about the rest of the receivers in a second, but I think week 1, Allen Lazard will probably be in my top 40, maybe even.
Yeah.
But I could see by season's end, he could be in the 60s or 70s. Like it's harder to project out with these guys because you have two young guys in Watson and Romeo. Is it Dubes or Daubs? I don't even know.
Daubs.
Yeah, Romeo Daubs. And then you have Watkins, who's kind of a wild card. You still have the slot guys, Cobb and Rogers. So there's a lot of variability to where I don't want to kind of conflate my early season rank with the full season rank. But I like what you said about maybe he's a good kind of trade a sell high guy. If he starts off hot.
I should have done that with Mike Williams last year. Should have done it.
Yeah. But I mean, Mike Williams had no reason to regress like that. Like he was still with Justin Herbert and the number 2 target on the team. Like, that was tough.
He's just always going to be inconsistent. So if he's going up like that, did I call him the Bitcoin of the NFL, or was that somebody else?
I haven't heard you say it, but that's actually
somebody's like fancy value was like literally tracking the Bitcoin price.
Yeah.
I think it was Mike Williams. So sell him right now, I guess.
Remember that heater I told you I was going on in betting? My crypto was the exact opposite. It was like for every dollar I made betting, I lost like $1 in crypto. So
sounds about right.
Everything evens
out. Yeah.
All right.
But did you want to talk about Christian Watson at all? Like, are you interested?
That's what I'm going to next.
Oh, okay,
so he's wide receiver 63.
Yeah.
And again, this is one where I feel like in week 1 we might be disappointed. I feel like people that draft him might come out week 1 and he might not even be in the top 3. But by the end of the season, I think he could be the most valuable Packer receiver because I think he has the most talent out of all these guys. And I also think he's a very smart player from everything I hear. So I think he's going to be able to pick up the offense and kind of, you have to kind of be on the same page with Rodgers, which takes some time. So I don't know if he gets off to a fast start, but I love the talent. And I think, if I'm betting on anyone, especially given the price, it's probably going to be Watson. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you really have nothing to lose in this range. And honestly, I was going to be interested in the first wide receiver selected by the Packers this year anyway. And I was a little bit nervous. They didn't take anybody in the first round, but when they took Watson early in the second, I thought that was a good move. He has fantastic measurables. Like you said, he's talented. He's way more talented than Allen Lazard. So I could see towards the end of the season, once he matures a little bit and, gets used to the NFL, that's maybe the one concern I have with him. Is he's transitioning to the NFL from a really small school in North Dakota State. So it might take him a little bit of time to adjust to the NFL. But once he does, I mean, having a first ballot Hall of Famer under center should help. And maybe Aaron Rodgers wants to force the issue that, look, you should have been drafting a rookie wide receiver, in the first couple rounds this whole time and force the issue with them. But either way, that's the perfect range to take a guy like Watson. So, well, I do love Lazard and where he's being drafted. Watson's the other Packer receiver I want to take a flyer on. Whereas Sammy Watkins is being drafted right around the same range. And obviously he does have some upside if he stays healthy, but I'm way more interested in, like an elite talent like Watson.
Yeah. And wide receiver 63 is, like you said, it's a great spot to gamble because when you look at historically first round running backs and wide receivers, usually about just under about half of them are going to hit in fantasy and kind of provide you with startable value. And then when you get to the second round, it drops to about maybe around 30%. So maybe one out of every 3 or so, 1 out of every 4. And Watson, he's a second round guy and he's going pretty late. I mean, Olave, like all the first round guys are kind of going before him, and some of the second round guys as well. So I really like the spot for him.
Yeah.
I think it's a very calculated high reward gamble, where you're not really losing much if it doesn't work out. Sammy Watkins, I mean, it's like, I want to write him off, but Aaron Rodgers seems to be talking him up, so I don't want to write him off completely. But he's another guy that I could see him actually being the reverse of Watson, because I think those two guys are the two that might be interchangeable. I think Lazard sticks either way because they love what he does in the run blocking game, and he just does all the dirty work. And then the slot is probably going to be Cobb or Rodgers. I know Lazard can play it, but I think Watson and Watkins are going to kind of be competing for the same routes. So I was looking, it felt like Watkins had a horrible season last year, but I was looking at his 4 games before getting hurt, and he averaged 4 catches for 64 yards per game, 20% targets per route run. Then he got hurt, and then he came back. And in the 8 games after he came back, he dropped to just 12% targets per route runs, 1.1 catches for 13 yards a game. So clearly the injury kind of hampered him. He couldn't get on the field even with that Ravens receiving core. But I mean, 4 for 64, as long as he's healthy, I think he could still be solid. But that's the thing. He's missed 4.3 games per year since his second year in the league back in 2015.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe if you're in a deeper league where you can manage your roster, like as opposed to a best ball, I'd be interested in Watkins. Because, yeah, like you said, I wouldn't be surprised if he excels in this offense. You could just never bank on his health. So, we're hearing glowing reports on him. It's like, no shit, he's really good. But just throughout his career, maybe it's his body size or something, but he just can never stay healthy. So this wide receiver depth chart reminds me of the Chiefs, where, obviously 1, maybe 2 of these guys are going to go off. So I am interested in investing in them. But just the fact that Watson's being drafted right around the same time as Watkins, it just seems like the smarter play is just go with the younger receiver with higher upside. But we can't take everybody on the Packers. So you have to pick your spots.
Well, you actually can in best ball, because I was gonna say like in redraft, like I said, we're not like too interested in Aaron Rodgers, but in best ball, the fact that he's down at quarterback 10, I mean, he's lower than he usually is. And his top receiver is 46. His number 2 and number 3 are 63 and 67. And then if you're counting his slot guys, Cobb is 107, Rodgers is 127. I mean, you can pretty much stack all of these, like the entire receiving core without much resistance from your fellow drafters at this point, So that is the way I would invest in the Packers, especially is best ball, because I think that's how you kind of get the upside by the discounted draft position.
Yeah, exactly. And best ball, you're just going for upside. And unfortunately, Rodgers at this point in his career, like I said, he doesn't have that same upside that he used to have. But by stacking, that's how you kind of elevate Rodgers, upside for your team specifically. So yeah, the fact that you can get these guys super cheap does make it appealing if you're going to take Rodgers to stack them with him.
Yeah. And like, any thoughts on any of the other guys? I know like Cobb, Rodgers, and Romeo Doubs are all going outside the top 100. I do think Cobb or Rodgers will be the starting slot receiver like all year. Like I think one of those two, like they're probably not going to go big with Lazard in the slot unless they really have to, or like unless Watkins, or Watson, unless Watkins stays healthy or Watson takes off really early.
Yeah, it's tough because between like Cobb, Rodgers, and Dobbs, Jesus, that's a tongue twister. I mean, they're going to be kind of competing with each other. So that's a tough call. And I liked Rodgers heading into Amari Rodgers, that is, heading into last year. He's a 3rd-round prospect. Could be a good slot receiver, but Randall Cobb's there, and Aaron Rodgers loves Randall Cobb. So I'm probably avoiding those guys. They don't really have the upside as the other 3 we talked about, Lazard, Watson, and Watkins. So I'm staying away from those guys. Those are guys that monitor in season if there is an injury to one of the top 3, but they're kind of competing with each other.
All right, let's move on to the tight ends. Robert Tonyan is actually being drafted as the tight end 15, which seems high for a guy who's coming off a serious injury. to his knee and signed a 1-year deal, 1 million guaranteed. And from the reports I'm hearing out of camp, he may not be ready by the start of the season. Remember, he got hurt in the middle of last year. So to kind of come a year would be kind of around mid-season. And, you know, even if it was like a 49, 50-week recovery, he would still miss a month or so. So he could be a PUP candidate to start the year. So tight end 15 seems a little rich for Tonyan, especially since he wasn't really good last year. Anyway, but what do you think of Tonyan here?
Yeah, tight end 15 does seem a bit rich. I mean, he does have double-digit touchdown upside with Davante Adams gone, but like you said, he might not even be ready for week 1. So in that range, I don't really want to target a guy who's just touchdown dependent. The whole tight end position general is getting a lot better in the NFL. So you get guys like Cole Kmet, who doesn't have any touchdown upside, Njoku, Tyler Higbee. I'd rather take guys like that, guys with upside who can get you a ton of, you know, catches and yards in any given week and might score some touchdowns. But with Tonyan, he just seems like he's going to be purely dependent on touchdowns. Like you said, he did struggle last year, you know, even though Davante Adams was, you know, the target hog, Tonyan wasn't great. So especially coming back from an ACL where he might not be ready, I'm completely off him at tight end 15.
Yeah, and with these kind of players, I think, you know, a couple years ago, that was the time to get on Tonyan when we kind of joked about it. You know, but
it was Jay Sternberger.
Yeah,
like whoever the hell ends up being the starting tight end, we thought it would be Sternberger, me and Friedman anyway. Yeah, and it ended up being Tonyan. But the point remains the same. Just, you know, you want the guy that Rodgers is going to be targeting heavily in the red zone.
Yeah, and that was 2 years ago. He was 20. That was his age 26 season. He's a guy that was undrafted. Now he's going to be 28 and coming off a serious knee injury after sucking the year before. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that ship has sailed, and they have Mercedes Lewis still playing at a high level, at least blocking wise. They like DeGuara. So I just think that it's going to be a committee approach. I don't think you want any Packers tight end this year. But let's go to the running backs, and those are guys you do want to own. Jones, RB12 and ADP, Dillon, RB26. Starting with Jones, how are you kind of projecting the workload for Aaron Jones? Because RB12, you know, that's an RB1 here, but him and Dillon were pretty neck and neck as the season wore on last year.
Yeah, it's hard to get too excited about Aaron Jones right now at RB12 because right now I have AJ Dillon getting just as many carries as Jones. Mm-hmm. And I think where Jones' upside is in the passing game, because we've been talking about the receivers. It's kind of a shit show right now without Davante Adams, and Aaron Jones is a really good pass catching back. I mean, they can line him up as a receiver if they have to. So he does have that upside, but this is going to be a pretty much split back committee. But they should run a lot more this year. We've already talked about that. So I just don't like spending up for a guy who's really in a two-way running back committee. So I'm going to be more interested in investing AJ Dillon a bit later on.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm looking at it. Although I do think Jones kind of reminds me of Nick Chubb a little bit, like very efficient in somewhat of an uncomfortable committee for as high as he's going. But I think the floor is still pretty high because, like you said, I think Aaron Jones has a chance to catch like 5 balls per game this year. Like last year, he was at 3.5, but his carries went from 14.4 in 2020 to 11.4 last year. So, you know, he for RB12, you're paying for a guy who was getting 15 touches per game last year. That's kind of low. But I actually think the carries stay the same in 10, 11, 12. But I think he could catch a lot more balls and be very efficient doing so and kind of be the beneficiary of some of those vacated Davante Adams touchdowns. So I'm not running out to draft Aaron Jones, but I'm not writing him off either. He had a very good season last year. They love him. Aaron Rodgers loves him. And I mean, he's pretty much got to be the offensive centerpiece this year. So, you know, it's just, it's not as sexy as it was, but I don't mind it. But Dillon, I think, even with Aaron Jones, you know, potentially putting up RB1 numbers, I think Dillon still could beat his RB26 ADP. You mentioned, you know, kind of them splitting carries pretty even. He had 11 carries per game last year and 2 receptions. So that's 13 touches per game in the Green Bay offense that really doesn't have a standout at wide receiver or tight end anymore. I'm not opposed. He's kind of like Kareem Hunt was, these last few years, where you just kind of you take him, and if Jones goes down, you get a surefire RB1. But if not, he still could beat his ADP.
That's exactly what I was going to say. He's my favorite type of running back to invest in the middle round, similar to Kareem Hunt, where he's the tail cheaper end of a running back by committee. And he's probably going to beat his ADP just by being healthy. Like, even if Aaron Jones were to play all 17 games, like, I think he could beat RB26. So the fact that he's already going to beat that gives him a high floor. And then, like you said, if Aaron Jones misses any time, I mean, AJ Dillon's going to be a slam dunk RB1, I think, in my weekly ranking. So he just has that injury upside as well. So that's my favorite type of running back to invest in. And he does have some pass catching upside. I mean, there was 4 games last year where he had 4 more receptions. I mean, he kind of looks and runs sort of like a Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry type, but he does have pass catching upside. So I love his upside. And we have to remember that the Packers were without David Bakhtiari for like all of last season, right? So he's going to be back this year. The running game itself is something I want to invest in. I think the best way to do it is through AJ Dillon.
Yeah, and I mean, if the offensive line can get healthy, I know Bakhtiari, some question marks, Elton Jenkins, some question marks, but PFF actually has the Packers O-line ranked number 5. So that's another underrated aspect. Like, you have Rodgers to kind of move the offense, even if it's not going to be as pretty as it was with Adams. You have a pretty solid O-line. You have a defense that should get you, keep you in positive time of possession. So I think it's going to be a very lucrative offense for running backs. I mean, these 2 guys, Jones and Dillon, those are the offensive centerpieces this year. Like that's really, we could argue about which receiver to take all day, but the bottom line is Matt LaFleur, I'm sure he's sitting there right now, figuring out ways to get Jones and Dillon the ball.
Yep.
All right. So sleeper on the Packers.
I would have to go with Allen Lazard still. I guess you could throw Christian Watson in there. I just think just getting potentially Aaron Rodgers' number 1 target right around the ADP wide receiver 50 is just too good to pass up. So Allen Lazard, I've said I have a ton of shares so far. His ADP is catching up, but I still think he's worth it. ADP wide receiver 46.
Yeah, I'll go Watson. I think just you want to take stabs at those rounds 1 and 2 skill players, wide receivers, running backs. And Watson fits the mold. He could end the year as the number 1, and he's got a lot of talent. And they traded up for him, so I think could be maybe a Amon-Ra St. Brown kind of situation, maybe a slow start, but I think there's going to be a point in this year where you're going to really benefit from having Watson on the roster. And I'll throw Dillon in there as a sleeper, just because, like you said, I mean, this guy's 1 Aaron Jones injury away from going completely off. So. Watson and Dillon for me. What about busts?
Have to go with Robert Tonyan, just based on his ADP. I mean, he's being drafted as a high-end tight end too, where obviously he has touchdown upside, but he might not be ready for week 1. The weeks where he doesn't score a touchdown, what's he going to provide you? 3 catches for 30 yards? No, thank you. I'd rather take chances on other guys in that range.
This seems like a weird year where I feel like nobody's really properly discounting the potential missed games for a lot of different players in ADP. Like Tonyan is one of them, Michael Thomas, Chris Godwin, even DeAndre Hopkins, who's got the suspension is going too high. I just feel like, I don't know if it's because it's early still or what, but it just seems odd to me that so many players that are going to, have a likelihood of missing time are not really getting properly discounted at this point. So,
and I guess this is a good time. Someone asked us on Twitter. It's a good question just about ADP in general. And just, it's so rough this time of year because every site has a different ADP. Yeah. So we're just giving a rough estimate. At the end of the day, we're drafting based on our rankings. So the ADP can change. But ultimately, we're just trying to give you a good idea of at the current ADP that we're using, if we would draft them or not. But we're aware that other sites, it's going to be completely different.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's jump to the Minnesota Vikings, who moved on from Mike Zimmer at head coach. So got Kevin O'Connell coming in. I think that's going to be, I think that's good news for the offense.
Yeah.
That's Vikings have never really had an offensive minded head coach in a while because Mike Zimmer's been there. He's defense first. So Kirk Cousins, QB 15. Maybe you get some streamer value out of him to start the year. Green Bay, at Philly, and then Detroit in the first 3 games. If you're looking for a guy to kind of pick up, that I think that's a solid guy. But any thoughts on Cousins in year 1 in this new offense?
Yeah, I think it's a huge positive sign for him and just everybody else in the offense. They're going from a defensive minded, lean on the run game type of head coach to a innovative Sean McVay disciple. So there's a ton of fantasy potential here. That's why I'm repping the Vikings hat today. And Kirk Cousins, QB 15, not gonna lie, that's probably where he should go. But like we said earlier, in best ball, he has a ton of stacking options. So I think, targeting him in best ball in that range and stacking him with some of the receivers and tight end potentially that we're going to talk about he has a high ceiling this year. Like, this offense could be a lot different this year. They could be a lot more pass heavy, more 11 personnel. So I'm very interested in Kirk Cousins at QB 15.
Yeah, he's averaging 34 touchdowns and 10 interceptions over the past 2 years. And now, he's getting O'Connell, who I think it was a really good sign that last year they get Matthew Stafford, bring him in, and because O'Connell was the offensive coordinator in LA, obviously that's McVay's offense, but O'Connell was kind of a student of his, and O'Connell helped Stafford to kind of come in and not miss a beat, and we know how that ended. And Stafford put up a pretty solid fantasy season. I think, given the weapon, I say weapon, it's really weapons, because Thielen, I don't think he's washed yet, but like, just having Justin Jefferson is a really positive thing for a quarterback. I think Kirk Cousins could give you like a Matthew Stafford like season where he ends up creeping into that top 11, top 10, because Cousins finished 1 spot behind Stafford in points per game last year. In terms of he finished QB 12 and Stafford was QB 11. So now he's going at QB 15. I think there's going to be a lot of weeks when Kirk Cousins is going to be in that top 10.
Absolutely. I mean, he already has a high floor. He's a pocket passer, so he doesn't have a massive ceiling. Like, he's probably not going to lead the league in scoring, but just in 2 QB leagues, getting him there, that's really valuable, because if he's your second quarterback, like you said, I think he does have that Stafford kind of upside, which is still very, very valuable. So I just love where he's going just in terms of my draft strategy.
Yeah, Matt Stafford, second in the league with 41 touchdown passes last year. Like, outside shot, Kirk Cousins has no less than 33 in each of the last 2 years. Right. Outside shot, if Thielen has another one of those massive red zone type years where he could put up that kind of number. Justin Jefferson, I think we talked about him on the NFC West pod with Cooper Kupp, saying, if there's anyone that's going to kind of challenge Kupp for that number 1 wide receiver spot, it's probably going to be Jefferson. 1,400 yards year 1, 1,616 last year. The touchdowns went from 7 to 10. The targets per game went from 7.8 to 9.8. I mean, there's nothing not to like about Justin Jefferson.
No, there isn't. I would also add that Jamar Chase will probably give Cooper Kupp a run for his money as well. Yeah. I just think getting either Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase, I have them essentially tied in my rankings. Getting either one of those guys in the middle of round 1 would probably be like part of my perfect draft strategy. If you can get a mid-round pick or a mid, picks 5 through 8, let's say, and you're able to get either one of these guys, I'd be very happy with that start.
Yeah. And again, just like, you kind of translate the O'Connell bringing in Stafford. O'Connell was also there when Cooper Kupp put up that season last year. So yeah. I just like it. I know, obviously might have to learn a little bit of a new offense, so that could be a detriment, but Jefferson is just so talented.
Yeah.
And when you put up over 1,600 a year too, and you've never put up lower than 1,400 in your career, I mean, I think a Kupp season is within the range of outcomes for him this year. Thielen is a little tougher, I think, because I don't think anybody wants to really draft him. Like, I feel like every year people are just waiting for him to kind of drop off a cliff. And his yard, efficiency wise, it has been. Yards per target dropped from 9 in 2018, 8.7, 8.6, 7.6 last year. But he averages over half a touchdown per game each of the last 4 years. And he's over 50% red zone touchdown conversion rate each of the last 3 years. So that's what usually regresses. So I'm curious as to where or how you're kind of projecting Thielen this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be turning 32, so he's definitely in the decline phase of his career. But like you said, he's not washed quite yet. And, in his prime, he was more of a 90 to 100 catch kind of guy with maybe 5 to 6 touchdowns. So he's kind of morphed into a lower volume, but, high value targets in the red zone. So I think we can bank on him being more of a touchdown wideout than we have in the past. So I'm factoring that in my model. But obviously, he's probably not going to put up 14 touchdowns like he did a couple seasons ago, but 10 plus are certainly in the range of possibilities. So I kind of like him, in the wide receiver 29 range.
Yeah.
He's going to have spiked weeks. The weeks where he doesn't score a touchdown, maybe he's not going to get you the 6 catches for 80 yards like we would hope. But in that range, like, he does have bankable touch-on upside. So if you believe in the scheme, helping the wideouts and tight ends and the passing game in general, I think Thielen's a good investment. And he's adapted his game at this point in his career. So that's why I think, even at 32, he's probably got 1, maybe 2 good seasons left in him.
Yeah, I think I have no problem taking him there because he's just a very good player. I think, I think the scheme will be good. I'm bullish on Cousins. And it only makes sense that Thielen would have another good year. He was, top 15 in half PPR points per game last year, even with, kind of the efficiency waning a little bit, obviously because of the touchdown. So, but you're kind of paying for that, like top 15, and you're getting him a wide receiver 29. So you're kind of, that touchdown regression is kind of factored in at his ADP.
Yeah. How many touchdowns are you projecting him for? Just curious.
I think around 8.
Yeah, I have him at 8.
Yeah,
so we're not going crazy. We're obviously factoring that in, and he's still wide receiver 23 for me. So, but he does have double-digit touchdown upside.
Yep. KJ Osborne, what do you think of him? I know some of the beat reporters out of Minnesota think he could take another step forward. He ran around on 77% of the dropbacks last year, but O'Connell's offense is primarily a 3 wide receiver offense. It looks like it's going to be because the Vikings really don't have a ton of tight ends on the roster, which I think they only have 5 in camp, which usually if you don't have 6, that usually tells me that like you're going to be more of a true like 3 wide kind of offense. Because if you have 6, then, first team has 2, second team has 2, third team has 2, so you can practice. But sometimes, teams with less, it kind of raises my eyebrows a little. So I think the Vikings are one of those teams. So what do you think of Osborne?
Yeah, I mean, he was a nice surprise last year. We sort of pegged him early on. And, he's one of the guys I think is going to get the biggest boost going to this offense, this scheme, because I think they will run more 11 personnel. And like you said, his routes run rate was around 70% last year. But if he can get over 90%, like if, I'm projecting the Rams, you have 3 receivers getting over 90%. I mean, he's going to be wide receiver 4 range, I think. And weeks 13 through 18 last year, he was wide receiver 16, and that's when he was running over 90% of routes run a game. That's because Adam Thielen was out. But if he can get that kind of usage when everyone's healthy, wide receiver 78, he's going to be a value there. And then he has that baked in injury upside if Thielen or Jefferson were to go down. So I love him as a value in this range.
Yeah, and if if you are a little worried about Thielen falling off, I think Osborne's essentially free at, like you said, wide receiver 78. So and he could get that kind of Van Jefferson usage, like where it was like Woods, Kupp, and Jefferson.
That's a good comp.
Yeah, and then it's like different type of player, but actually helps Osborne because he would be running 90% of routes, and he would be targeted a little more because he's not just running wind sprints out there.
Right.
He's going to do some more things short and intermediate as well. So, and he proved he can score touchdowns. Had 7 scores last year. So, I like Osborne at wide receiver 70. Not a sexy one, but one of those kind of things, kind of, it could fortify the back end of your roster, especially in a deeper league. Irv Smith, tight end 21, coming back, missed last year. I think he could actually beat this ADP too. I mean, if it's if it's not Osborne, it could be Smith, and it could be both. Because remember, Tyler Higbee also turned into like a 80-90% routes run guy, for O'Connell last year without like a second guy. And if you look at the depth chart again, only 5 tight ends in camp, and behind Irv Smith Jr. is Ben Ellefson, Johnny Munt, who only blocks, Zach Davidson, and 7th rounder Nick Muse. So
lovely.
This could be like an 86% routes run per drop back week in, week out for Irv Smith Jr.
Yeah, you said he might be able to beat his tight end 21 ADP. Hell yeah, he can beat that ADP. And, I loved him heading into 2021. It was so sad. It was such a depressing day when he had his season-ending injury. It was a torn meniscus. It happened before the season, so he appears to be 100% ready to go right now. And they got rid of Tyler Conklin, so like you said, he has zero competition at tight end. I expect him to be running around over 80% of the time in a McVay-like offense. So yeah, sign me up for him at tight end 21. I loved him heading into last year, and I love him heading into this year. He has so much talent, so much upside, and the depth chart is wide open for him to just tear it up this year. So yeah, give me all the Irv Smith shares at tight end 21.
Yeah, and it's like, for people that maybe are newer, or less advanced, like routes run for tight ends is so important, because there's only a few tight ends that are truly special in terms of talent, and they're getting routes anyway. Andrews, Kelsey, everyone else is going to come down to who can run a route on, let's say 75-80% of the dropbacks versus 55 to 65% of the dropbacks. And I think Smith has that upside, just looking at the breakdowns of the routes in previous O'Connell offenses. Usually it's 3 wide. There's 1 tight end. The tight end's not blocking a ton. So yeah, Irv Smith can be like a poor man's like TJ Hawkinson, or a poor man's Gesicki, or somebody like that that's going to go rounds earlier than.
Yeah, and I mean, we have to remember throughout his early career, he had to compete with Kyle Rudolph.
Yeah.
And there was a brief stretch where Rudolph missed like 4 games, and Irv Smith was a top 5 tight end. So we've only seen brief glimpses of him without competition at tight end. He's been really, really good. So that's why I'm excited for him finally, hopefully this year, to break out.
Yeah. I mean, this division in general, I find that I think it's just an undervalued division. Obviously, we'll get to Detroit and Chicago, but I feel like this division it's a lot harder to find bust. And almost every player, I'm like, yeah, I like this guy at ADP.
Yeah.
Which is like the exact opposite of some of the others. But I think you buy Irv Smith at tight end 21. If you wait on tight end, he's a great, like, I don't know is it 0 tight end a thing? I don't know if that's a thing, but whatever you call it, if you're gonna wait to be the last person to take a tight end, and maybe you're gonna double up, or you're just, you need a second guy for best ball, like Irv Smith absolutely could end up as a TE1 this year. Dalvin Cook going RB4. I think he's a guy that, the only thing with RB4 for me and Dalvin Cook is I still think you take McCaffrey over Dalvin Cook. That's not how ADP is right now, but that's my only nitpick with Dalvin Cook. Besides that, I think the ADP is pretty much spot on. What about you?
Yeah, there's nothing really to nitpick with Dalvin Cook. I mean, he's elite when healthy, but he's never played more than 14 games in the season. So he is a little injury prone. He turns 27 this year, so probably has one more elite season left in him. I think he's going to be really good in the scheme. They've talked about using him way more as a pass catching back. I think they're lining up at receiver some of the plays. So I think that's going to really elevate his upside. But yeah, you can't really fault anybody that takes Dalvin Cook, but yeah, give me Christian McCaffrey ahead of him. It's crazy that his ADP's ahead of him, but yeah, like there's nothing bad to say about Dalvin Cook other than maybe, his he has one of the best handcuffs in the league in Alexander Madison. So the past few seasons, I haven't drafted Dalvin Cook. I've had Alexander Madison, and that's paid off. But at the end of the day, Dalvin Cook is elite, and we're probably going to get one more really, really good season of him.
Yeah, and we like the offense. We like so offensive line is kind of average, but there's nothing wrong with getting Dalvin Cook as your first round pick.
Oh, and I will say, real quick with Dalvin Cook, I forgot to mention, but he had really bad touchdown luck last year. He only scored 3 touchdowns on 15 rush attempts inside the 5. Normally you'd expect around 6.5 touchdowns, maybe, running back the caliber of Cook closer to 7, 8 touchdowns. So he was 3.3 touchdowns below expectations last year. So, which is the most of anybody in my model. So we should see some positive touchdown regression this year from him. So there's a lot of things to like with Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, and the year before, the 2 years prior, he scored 30 combined touchdowns in the same amount of games, give or take. And even the year 2020 when, Thielen scored 14 and Jefferson was going crazy, Cook had 17 touchdowns in that 2020 campaign. So he's got that kind of upside.
Yep.
Madison, RB 36. I mean, I'm guessing you like him there too then.
Well, I was going to say, like, we've been able to get him, I want to say, like, outside of the top 45 the past couple seasons. And let's face it, I mean, he's a true handcuff. He's not going to offer any value as long as Dalvin Cook is healthy. So, unfortunately, we're maybe going to get a couple games of, let's face it, like, when Dalvin Cook is out, sometimes I have Alexander Madison ranked higher than I would have had Dalvin Cook, just because there's no competition. When Dalvin Cook's out, it's just Madison's getting every single touch. So sometimes he's a top 3 option. So he has the highest injury upside of any backup running back. But unfortunately, we can't even bank on him getting more than a couple games any given season. So just RB 36, you're still seeing guys that have the potential to be a bell cow back in that range. So RB 36 seems pretty rich. And I love stashing backup running backs, try to, hit on that upside, but just this range seems a little bit too rich for me this year.
Yeah, I would take him as long as he drops past that. I think, because then you're talking about an RB4 versus essentially an RB3.
Right.
So I don't mind it just because, it's kind of an anti-fragile thing where, somebody's going to draft Dalvin Cook in the top 5, right, probably. And then, he's never played more than 14 games. Madison's gone completely off. Like last year, he had a 32 touch, 171-yard game, a 32 touch, 153-yard game, a 25 touch, 124-yard game. So like, that's, I'm willing to pay that for my running back 4, just,
that's a good point. If he's your running back 4, absolutely. But if you're doing like the 0 RB approach and he's your RB2, that's a bit dicey. I think in this range, you definitely want a guy like Kareem Hunt or like, like a Cordell Patterson is going around this range. You just need somebody to get points. But like you said, like if he's your RB4, absolutely. Like he's amazing to have like as your, on your bench or in best ball, something like that. But just, I would not want him to be my RB2. That's for sure.
All right. Sleeper, who you got?
Oh, for man, like everybody. I just love everybody in this offense. So I would go with Irv Smith, just based on ADP, and KJ Osborne. I mean, he has probably the highest floor of anybody in that wide receiver 80 range, and he has a high ceiling. So it's essentially a tie between those two guys.
Yeah, same here. What about any busts?
No one, like you said, this whole division is great. I feel like everybody's affordable ADP, and I maybe Alexander Madison, just because you can't guarantee that he's going to have those spiked weeks. It does require a Dalvin Cook injury, so maybe just based on ADP, Madison is the most expensive, but certainly in certain situations, like he's going to be worth it because he has top 5 upside when Cook does miss time. So, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's probably Madison.
All right, let's go to Detroit. This, I don't know about you, but I feel like Detroit's going to be a pretty competent offense this year. I don't know if people kind of realize it.
Thank you, because I thought I was going to have to defend myself by saying that same thing.
No, I mean, so they have. I mean, you can tell me what you like about them, but for me, it's they have an offensive line when healthy. PFF ranks them number 3 heading into the year. Decker, Jackson, Ragnow, Vaitai, and Sewell. That's one, everyone across that line. You can't really poke any holes in that. And they have Amon-Ra St. Brown entering year 2. DJ Chark is an upgrade on Reynolds. And those guys are just going to be biding time until Jamison Williams, a very talented guy, gets back. And then you still have Hawkinson coming back. You have DeAndre Swift, who now gets a good O-line because last year they ranked 20th in run blocking because everyone was hurt. And you have a quality backup with Jamal Williams, and Jared Goff is kind of shown us that he can be competent when he has protection and weapons.
Yeah, I was going to say the only problem with the offense is probably the quarterback, but everywhere else is loaded. So I hate to say it, but Jared Goff at QB 27 seems like a good price because he's probably he's the last quarterback where you can draft, where you can safely pencil him in for at least 15 starts as long as he stays healthy. So I just love the talent around him. As long as everybody stays healthy, you have arguably one of the best pass catching backs in the league. TJ Hawkinson, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I love how they brought in DJ Chark and Jamison Williams in case Jared Goff does want to throw the ball downfield. He'll have options this year. So I probably, I'm going to target everybody else in this offense, but Jared Goff at QB 27 is pretty good in the later rounds of the draft. If you want like a third quarterback in best ball, or your 2 QB super flex league, like I do like Jared Goff at his ADP.
I actually think Jared Goff is a second quarterback in the best ball. I think that's his upside because you wait, right? And so instead of going like drafting one of those guys in the mid-range, like rounds earlier, you essentially are one of the last people to draft your QB2, and you're still getting like, I think the Lions are going to be putting up like mid-20s points per game this year. Because like Jared Goff has been fine. Like we've seen Jared Goff in the Rams offense when he had a good O-line and like good receivers. Like he was fine. He wasn't amazing, but he was fine. So I think that's really how you take advantage of the QB 27 ADP for Goff is you take him as your QB2. St. Brown. I'm like the splits here are crazy. So it's like and a lot of it coincided with Hawkinson going down, but he also got a lot better as the year progressed. Weeks 1 to 12, he was 80th out of 102 receivers in PFF receiving grade. And it kind of backs it up. We were like, oh, we liked him as a sleeper. Is he going to hit? We didn't know. A lot of, it wasn't really making a huge impact. But then weeks 13 and 8 to 18, 8th in PFF receiving grade. And if you just take out his first 3 weeks, even from week 4 on, he averaged 8.6 targets, 6.7 catches, 67 yards per game, and 0.4 touchdowns. That is 13.6 half PPR points per game. That puts him at wide receiver 13, a couple of tenths of a point behind Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, he's very tricky to project this year because, like you alluded to, I mean, I feel like anytime we mention sleepers, we mentioned him like towards the end of the draft. We liked him. We love the landing spot. But the end of last season was just absolutely insane. You mentioned, weeks 13 through 18, he was 8th in PFF grade. Who cares about that? He was number 2 in fantasy football, only behind Cooper Kupp. So, I mean, he obviously has that upside. But we have to remember that they were without DeAndre Swift and TJ Hawkinson for most of that time. So his target rate per route run went through the roof. It was 32%. Almost every single week, it was over 30%. And it was 22% across the entire season. So unfortunately, a Swift back, Hawkinson back with Chark added to the mix, Jamison Williams, once he's healthy, there is going to be way more competition for targets. So I guess in order to really like him at ADP, you have to think that Jared Goff is going to, take it to the next level. And there's going to be more yards to go around, which you seem to think. So
I do.
He's I mean, God, it seems like we're paying up a little bit too much for the end of season stretch, but he is still in a good spot. And, Jared Goff, he doesn't like to throw it downfield. So just because they have Chark and Jamison Williams running go routes doesn't mean he's going to target them. It could mean that Amon-Ra St. Brown has more space over the middle of the field. So yeah, it's a tough call. He's my wide receiver 32 now, just because you do have to factor in, the target regression just a bit. And he's probably not going to be more than a 5-6 touchdown kind of guy. So that's why I'm a little bit lower on him. But obviously he has that baked in upside if guys start to go down.
Yeah, well, that's why I kind of talked about the PFF grade, because obviously, with all the targets vacated, he put up great fantasy numbers. We know that, but like the eye test, it kind of confirms the eye test. Like he on higher volume, he got better. And as a rookie, you always want to see a guy like improve, heading into year 2, which is when they take bigger leaps. So like, I'm actually buying St. Brown at wide receiver 26 because like I think there's like an outside chance he just goes completely like Odell Beckham in year 2. Like just like he's the guy. Like it doesn't matter who else is there. It's like he's getting the 10 targets every game from Jared. And he's the Cooper Kupp. He's like, you know what I mean? Like, he's just so like I'm wide receiver 20. Like, I feel like the floor is still high enough where like what's gonna happen? He's just gonna get 5 catches for 60 yards instead of 6 catches for 80 yards.
Right.
Like, you know, I feel like the floor is high enough for me to still take that chance because I don't think we've seen the best of St. Brown yet necessarily. Like, I think he's just a really good football player.
Yeah, and I was kind of referencing him as sort of the Cooper Cup in this offense before the Cooper Cup eruption last year. But that's the guy, that's the kind of guy that Goff does like to target. But how about towards the end of the year, they were starting to give him some carries too. So like, sort of a Debo Cup hybrid, which I mean, sounds like the most amazing fantasy football player ever. But he had a rushing touchdown. They gave him a carry in 5 of the last 6 games. So I mean, they're going to give him the ball one way or another. So yeah, I still love his upside. There's so many mouths to feed in this offense that unless you're projecting Goff for over 260 yards a game, it's really hard to give targets to everybody. So that's why the slight dip. I hate to put cold water on it, but just slight dip in his targets this year.
I just wouldn't. I mean, I guess it's a bold take, but I wouldn't be surprised if like we're entering like week 4 and it's just like, oh, who's like our wide receiver 5? Oh, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown, like kind of like Debo last year. Or remember Keenan Allen when he kind of snuck into that top 5 for the first time back in the day?
A legend. But I'm saying so we get to Sean, who's your QB5? And I'm like Stephon Diggs, of course. And you're like, you'll never guess who mine is. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm like, holy
I could see that. I'm just saying outside shot. That's all I'm saying. Like, I could be dead wrong. I still feel like the floor is high, even if I'm dead wrong about him having a great ceiling, but I really see an outside shot for him. I just think he's good, that good.
We were projecting him as a wide receiver 1 towards the end of last year, right? I'm trying.
He was the wide receiver 2. I would hope.
Well,
I mean, for like those last 6 weeks.
Yeah, like how they're doing and like how we're actually ranking them is a little bit different. But yeah, I just remember having his targets through the roof. So I would not be surprised. You're probably going to force that by week 3 just to say I told you so. But I can definitely see it.
Chark is going wide receiver 60. He's tough because I feel like once Williams comes back, he's kind of going to be the odd man out. But I just give you an interesting stat. It has like, essentially DJ Chark in his best year, 2019, he had 73 catches and he forced 11 missed tackles. And he has not forced a missed tackle since. On 60 catch. So it's not like a yak guy where like you're like, oh my God, he's falling off because he's not forcing missed tackles. But I just thought that was kind of illustrative of why he's been disappointing since. Like he hasn't made anybody miss in the last 2 years.
That's interesting. And like going to this Lions offense, I mean, he's going to be the downfield threat. I just don't see how he sees a ton of targets because Jared Goff, he ranked 18th in pass attempts last year. He ranked 26th in pass attempts, 20 plus yards downfield. Now you could say that he didn't really have a deep threat last year. And that might be true, but he just doesn't seem like the guy that's going to really target Chark a whole lot. So I think Chark might open up things for the other guys rather than, Chark being a valiant himself. And like you said, once Jameson Williams comes back, I think I like DJ Chark as a talent, but Jameson Williams is on a whole other level. So unfortunately, Chark's going to be sort of on borrowed time until Williams comes back. So if anything, you're going to get value from Chark early in the season, but he's not going to that's the time of year it's easy to get value from your wide receiver. So I'm off on Chark at wide receiver 60. He's one of the reasons I do like Goff heading into the season, but Chark himself, like just based on this landing spot, it's probably not good for him.
Yeah. Would you take a shot on Williams at 62 or it's hard to kind of factor in? We don't really know exactly when he'll be back.
Yeah, it's just hard to know when he'll be back. And again, I wasn't really thrilled about the landing spot. There's already a ton of weapons in this offense. Like it's going to be hard for him to get targets and it's going to depend on Jared Goff deciding to throw it deep. Cause I think, Williams is going to be sort of a Deshaun Jackson type of deep threat. Like he's going to have spiked weeks, but just it's really hard to take him, especially not knowing if he'll like when would you guess he's going to be ready by week 6?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I could see him starting on the PUP and missing about 6 games.
Yeah.
But so I'm guessing about 10 games, 8 to 10. I think 8 to 10 games of the season.
Brutal.
I think he'll be there. Yeah, but I mean, he's a very talented guy. So if he's dropping, he's low enough where I guess what would he be, your wide receiver 5? If you can get him and then get like a high floor guy like a KJ Osborne maybe, or maybe you draft Williams and Chark and then you just kind of do it that way. But
oh God, yeah. No, I like the Williams Osborne stack.
Yeah. You can kind of finesse it, especially if you have an IR slot, so you're not really wasting a bench slot. That's because I don't like wasting bench slots, period. I want to use them on running backs and things like that. But again, I think these first and second round rookies, you're gonna get hits out of these guys, so you want exposure.
Yeah.
And the guy is talented, so I'm not completely off him. But I think if you have an IR slot, that's when you take
absolutely
advantage of him. Hawkinson, talk about a guy. First 2 weeks of the season, he averaged nearly 11 targets per game, 82 yards, 1.5 touchdowns, 22.4 half PPR points per game. Then the rest of the year, 6.9 targets, 4.6 catches, 42 yards, 0.2 touchdowns, 7.7 half PPR points. So his week 3 on pace would have put him at tight end 16, right behind Tyler Higbee. So, I mean, he's going tight end 6. He might actually be the guy that gets squeezed a little bit with all these receivers and Swift healthy.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I'm off of him at tight end 6. Last year, I was all over him at tight end 6 because, I just thought he was going to be a target monster. He's still an elite talent, sort of entering his prime.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, after he tailed off last year, it's clear that this is Amon-Ra St. Brown's offense. So I'm probably going to stay away from Hawkinson at tight end 6. That's just way too high. And that's really when the tier opens up, where really tight end 6 to tight end like 14, I have within like 5 points of each other. So I usually don't target the top of a tier. I target the bottom of a tier. So I am completely off Hawkinson at tight end 6. I think that's just way too high. And yeah, he's probably the guy that's probably going to take the biggest hit from, so many weapons in this offense.
Yeah. Swift, RB11. What do you think of him there?
Yeah, I like that. Like he has top 5 upside if he can stay healthy. I mean, Jamal Williams factored in a lot more than I anticipated last year. Like, let's be honest, he does cap his upside a bit, but still Swift is going to see just as much work as possible in the receiving game, which is good because, we expect the Lions to be trailing most of the time. So that's going to be a very valuable role on a team like this. So I love Swift's upside, especially, you get him at the end of the RB1 tier. I'm all for that. And just fingers crossed that he can actually stay healthy this year.
Yeah. Again, number 3 O-line projected by PFF, good quality starters all the way across the line. Had 11 games with 51 or fewer rushing yards, 2 with 130 plus, and still had 100 plus scrimmage yards in 6 out of the 13. So like he, his median could be close to 100 scrimmage yards.
Yeah.
And I think Williams is not going to cap his upside this year, because 11 games with Swift, he still averaged 10.8 carries last year. But I think this Lions team is going to be like a pass heavy shootout team this year. Like, hopefully. I think Goff is going to be around that 260 yards. And I think you're just going to see less running, because now they clearly wanted to upgrade the passing game. And I think a lot of the product of like Williams getting double-digit touches and, they're using all these running backs and Craig Reynolds. And like, I think that was a product of, they just couldn't stick with teams if they had to throw it. But this year, I think they can. And their defense is still not going to be good. So
yeah, don't talk shit about Craig Reynolds, by the way. And last year, like he had a lost season because his season was essentially over after week 12, because they brought him back the past couple of games, gave him a few touches. So his season was essentially over in week 12, but wasn't he like dealing with an ankle injury or something earlier in the season? I remember you fading him early in the season. So what was it? The first 3 or 4 weeks, he was, questionable with an ankle injury or something like that. So
heading into the year.
Yeah. So he was only really healthy for maybe 5 to 6 games last year.
Yeah. So like Swift at RB11, Williams is probably the guy. I think you're probably a year late trying to recapture that with Williams, even at RB51. Because even if I don't even think he's like the handcuff necessary, if they keep Reynolds on the roster. If they don't keep Reynolds on the roster, then maybe I'd like him a little more. But if they do, I think Reynolds is actually the better runner. So Yeah, I'm off Williams this year unless Reynolds gets cut. Sleepers bust on the Lions. Who you got?
I think the sleeper just has to be Jared Goff, just because there's so many weapons in this offense. And I kind of like your idea of just, if you're in a best ball format, make him your QB2 and you can get him super cheap. So obviously his upside is limited, but if this offense is as pass heavy and exciting as you and I think it could be, Jared Goff would be a steal at QB 27.
Love Goff, and I mean I know you disagree, but I think I'm on around St. Brown. I think.
I think he has
top 10 upside. Like, yeah. I really do. Even with the additions, I think he does. So
no, I definitely I can support you in this. Like my rank is lower than you, but I don't think you're crazy for being high on him.
What about Bus?
Oh man, like all these guys are pretty cheap. Maybe TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah.
And maybe honestly, maybe DJ Chark, just because in that range, there's so many guys with massive upside in that wide receiver 60 range. And like we said, like his upside's capped because when Jamison Williams, returns in say week 6 or 8, it's going to be really tough for Chark to see, those deep balls or just enough targets really put up value. So even though he's going super late, wide receiver 60, you're still passing up on some guys with like massive upside. So maybe Chark along with Hawkinson for me.
Yeah, I think Hawkinson just doesn't really fit in the strategy for me either, in terms of tight end 6. And I would even say Jamal Williams, because I'm concerned about the efficiency. First of all, he had a career low in yards per catch last year at 6.0. He finished below 4 yards per carry for the third time in his 5 seasons, and he's turning 27s. And I think Reynolds, even if Reynolds doesn't make the roster, I think if Swift went down, they may call Reynolds up, or from the practice squad if he's back on there. So those two guys for me. Let's do the Bears. We can go a little quicker with them. Mm-hmm. I guess where are you on Justin Fields? He's going as QB 18 in ADP.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, he was disappointing as a rookie, mainly as a passer. Obviously, he has the rushing upside. I still remember his debut when we set his projection around like 220 passing yards, and the books had him at like 180, or just hammering the shit out of it. And he threw for 68 yards. So we had to adjust pretty quickly there. But he did show signs of life towards the end of the season. Weeks 14 and 15, he was QB9. I think once the Bears started to move around the pocket a little bit more, like when he's running and scrambling, like he's obviously good as a runner, but also good as a passer. So hopefully the new scheme under Luke Getsky, who's coming over from the Packers, helps him a little bit. So I'm still buying into Fields' his upside. If you're in a 1 QB league, he's the kind of guy that you like to stash on your bench because he has league winning upside. But if you're in a 2 QB league, he still does have a pretty low floor. He's going to have to make a significant year 2 leap, I think. But just, you can't pass up this rushing upside that he has. So he's still pretty good value in that, QB 18 range.
Oh yeah. I'm taking him all day at QB 18. Like, for 2 reasons. Number one, and it's, 3 reasons. One is Matt Nagy's gone, but
yeah, that helps.
Yeah. In his first 6, full starts, he averaged 24 pass attempts. So, they kind of had the kid gloves on him, only 154 passing yards per game, half a passing touchdown per game. Then his last 3 full starts, so not counting the game he left, but his last 3, he jumped to 34 attempts per game. So like closer to the league averaged 267 passing yards per game and 1.3 touchdowns. Still not great, but solid enough when you're adding in rushing production. And I mean, this Bears defense, I don't think it's going to be very good this year. Mm-hmm. So it's not to the extent like the Lions, because I think the Lions actually have a lot of good pieces everywhere. The Bears don't have the same kind of line or the skill players, but I still think Fields is going to be in a lot of trailing game scripts to where he gets the passing numbers to respectable places.
Yeah.
And then he gives you the rushing upside. So yeah, QB 18, I think he can smash that.
Yeah, it's a shame, shame on the Bears for not really building around him, because we've talked about this before, but they lost Allen Robinson, and they bring in Byron Pringle to be the wide receiver 2, and then they draft Velus Jones, which was a bit of a head scratcher. So they didn't really give Justin Fields much to work with this year. So my knock on him isn't really him specifically. It's just like the team building strategy around him heading into this year anyway has not been good. So if anything, maybe that's going to force him to run a bit more if he doesn't have wide receivers separating. So yeah, it's unfortunate for him that they didn't really, build for 2022 for him. But yeah, just love his upside. So I can get behind him at QB 18.
The most egregious thing about the building around him is not even the Byron Pringle.
Ooh.
It's the fact that every projected depth chart and every report I read, Equinemius St. Brown is running with the starters. Like,
oh my God. You
like, how do you replace Allen Robinson with Equinemius St. Brown? Like,
that is brutal.
It's like, in what world does this do to? I know Luke Getsy's from the Packers and Equinemius is from the Packers, but like this, like, in what world is Equinemius St. Brown, like a starting caliber receiver? But I do like Darnell Mooney at wide receiver 32 though. What do you think?
Yeah, I love him at wide. He's going to be a target hog in this offense. Like we just said, the wide receiver depth chart is the worst in the league, especially behind Mooney. So love Mooney this year. He's wide receiver 32, so you can get him pretty cheap.
Yeah.
And I'm worried with opposing defenses can double team him, scheme to slow him down, but he's still good enough. I believe in him. And the only other concern, I guess, is he had 400 plus receiving yard games last year, and 3 of them were with Andy Dalton. So maybe with Justin Fields scrambling a lot more, that does sort of cap his upside. But at the end of the day, who the hell else is he going to throw to other than Mooney and Kmet, really? So just Mooney is just really high floor guy, high ceiling guy too. He can, be a deep threat. So love getting Mooney sort of in that wide receiver 32 range.
Yeah, and I was worried a little bit about, kind of to your point about, without Robinson there, defenses are going to be able to kind of focus in on Mooney. But I looked at the 5 games that he played without Allen Robinson last year. He averaged 9.6 targets, 5.2 catches, 78 yards per game. So that's very good. I know it's a small sample, obviously 5 games, but that's all we have to go off of. And I mean, especially considering how feeble that, the quarterback situation was last year. And, for him to put up nearly 10 targets a game and nearly 80 yards a game in 5 games without Robinson in that offense last year, entering year 3, I think that's all I need to hear. Give me a team's wide receiver 1 at 32 all day. Like,
no, I remember projecting him last year when Allen Robinson was out. Like, his projections on my model were through the roof.
Yeah.
And we kind of do that where a guy's like through the roof and we're kind of like pushing him down. You're packing up your luggage and you're trying to squeeze it on there. Like, I had to like push his projections down because I had like embarrassing rankings for him. Like, he was inside my top 15 when Robinson was out. So it's just like, you're right. Like, with Robinson out, maybe that does help him because like we said, who else are they going to throw it to? So yeah, like the fact that you can get him outside of the top 30 is criminal in my opinion, just based on his expected target share. So yeah, love him.
His non-A-Rob pace, his pace without A-Rob, his pace without A-Rob would have put him right between CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks as a top 24 receiver. So yeah,
I believe it.
Love me some Mooney this year. Yep. Not even going to talk about the rest of these guys, except
thank you.
I guess Cole Kmet. He actually, without A-Rob in 5 games, 7 targets, 4.4 catches, 48 yards per game, no touchdowns. But that pace would have still put him. That would have put him as the tight end 18, but that, like, you can't expect him to get 0 touchdowns. So maybe a little bit of a chance to outkick his ADP by a couple of spots here and finishes like a mid-range tight end 2 or a high-end one instead of the low-end one he's being drafted as.
Yeah, I would say mid-range tight end 2. And, obviously he's not going to score 0 touchdowns again this year. And it helps that Jimmy Graham is gone. So, that's going to help him out considerably, but he's going to be a volume based, high mid-range tight end 2. Certainly in this offense, you can't really expect more than 5 touchdowns from him, but I'll take a few this year. So yeah, I think he's a safe, higher floor kind of guy in that range where you can't get too excited about him, but he's entering year 3. He's only 23 years old. So he's definitely due for a breakout season. And, his snaps and routes run rates should only go up with Graham out of the picture.
Where are you on Montgomery? He's going as RB16.
That's right where I have him. I think that's a fair place to get him. Yep. Should see a ton of volume this year. Again, this year, Getsky is talked about being established the run kind of guy, but they're not going to be leading enough games to really lean on that. But Montgomery, his receiving upside has really flourished the past couple seasons. Ever since Tariq Cohen essentially went down, Montgomery's been the true workhorse. So he's going to be used even if they're trailing. He's going to see that receiving usage. So love Montgomery. His upside's pretty limited. I mean, he's not a home run threat. He's not going to really score double-digit touchdowns, but just he's going to be a reliable guy in that sort of frozen pond tier where he's going to be the man. So I'm right in line with his ADP at RB16.
Yeah, love the usage, hate the O-line. RB16 seems fair. All right, sweepers and busts.
Oh man, the sleeper has to be Darnell Mooney. You got me all excited.
Oh yeah, love it.
Post Allen Robinson, his upside is just immense. So it's got to be Mooney.
Yeah, and I'll say Fields as well. I think QB 18, like we're always talking about these running quarterbacks. He improved down the stretch on higher volume. The defense is going to be bad. So yeah, like Fields as well. Bust. I mean, there's no one we're really thinking about drafting outside of those guys to even call.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Montgomery's right. I wouldn't touch Jones or, maybe. I mean, Jones went in round 2 or round 3. It was round 3, right?
Round 3.
Yeah. So that knocks his like chances of hitting down a lot, just statistically speaking. He's more like a Jakeem Grant. So yeah, I wouldn't touch any of these other receivers. I don't think outside of Mooney and Kmet, and even Kmet. That's that's just 2 tight end. So yeah, no real busts, but
the bust would be anybody outside of Fields, Montgomery, Mooney, and Kmet.
Yeah.
And Khalil Herbert is probably a good handcuff back because whenever Montgomery goes down, he's going to be the workhorse back. So there really isn't a bust on this team, in my opinion.
Yeah, just don't draft Equanimous.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's gonna wrap it up. I think we went pretty long, but I think it was important to kind of talk about
a good division.
Yeah, this is a lot of value to be had here. But if you guys want to find Sean on Twitter, you can find him at @the_oddsmaker. You can find me at Chris Raybon. You can find us at those same handles in the Action Network app. Be sure to check out our episodes on the AFC and NFC West, South, and now we're finished the North. Next week, we'll be back with the AFC East. And again, reminder, if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star review. We'll pick out a winner to get a free year of the Action Pro sub that includes all our weekly rankings and all that good stuff. So be sure to do that. Until next time, let's get this shmoney.